everyone. I'm Margaret Chan, and I'm delighted to be with all of you this afternoon. Welcome to Ask the Career Expert webinar. Today's discussion will focus on changing careers. Let me start by sharing a little bit about myself and my background. As Kashima mentioned, I've been a career and executive coach for about 10 years. I work with clients on a range of topics, including career transitions, leadership development, which is really about how to be more successful in your career. And also I work with clients who are interested in boards. I have an MBA from Kellogg, as well as I received my coaching certification from Columbia. My early career was in marketing at General Foods and Citibank. After 6 years, I realized I was in the wrong career, so I do understand how some of you may feel. Marketing just took too long for me to see the results of my work. I was still very young. I was in my 20s, and I knew since I'd be working for 40 years, I had to get this right and find something that I would find more fulfilling. So I hired a career coach, and I just gave her one criteria. I wanted a career where I could see the fruits of my labor faster. She suggested consulting, given the project orientation. Honestly, I'm not sure why I didn't think of it myself, but I did move into consulting, a very specialized type. I moved into executive search, and I loved it. And I did it for 25 years. And search is really about helping companies to recruit and build leadership. And in my last 18 years, I was with Spencer, Stuart, and Korn Ferry, large global search firms. So I've had the personal experience of changing from a career that I really didn't like to one that I loved and did for 25 years. It was a huge difference in the quality of my life. So in search, I did work in multiple industries and functions. I did CEO succession work. I also recruited for boards. So I have a deep knowledge about the critical factors in companies' hiring decisions. I'm a recommended coach for alumni, and I'm on the alumni websites of Chicago, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, and Cornell. So let's talk about career changes. If your current career is not a good fit, how do you pivot? It can be a bit daunting. How do you pursue a new career with no experience in the industry or function? How do you leverage your current experience? How do you compete with candidates who do have the experience? And how do you change careers without starting all over again? Let's talk about the hiring company's perspective, because understanding their perspective will really help you to proactively address their concerns. When companies seek new leaders from other industries, they value their new thinking and their new perspectives, and it happens all the time. But for companies, they do view it as being a bit more risk. So what are the hiring companies' risk factors? When they hire someone without experience in their business, which they call their industry, or the function, basically they're taking a chance with you, let's say if you don't have the industry or functional experience, versus other candidates with experience. Why is it a little more of a risk for them? First of all, they don't know if you will adjust to their industry or the new function. They also don't know whether you will succeed in it. And they also don't even know whether you will like it because it's all brand new to you. So let's talk about some strategies for making successful career changes. Changing your industry and your function at the same time is the most challenging for you. And it's a bit more risk for you as well as the company. Instead, do it in 2 steps. First, change your function in your current industry. Develop a track record of success, because within your own company, they know your performance, they know your skills, they know your personality, so they can make a more informed assessment of your potential fit with the new function. And they and you will also have a better assessment of your likelihood of success. So, for example, they may know you're highly organized or have a track record of creating organization out of chaos. And your company is more willing to take a chance with you versus new companies hiring for both a new function and an industry. Okay, so let's move to step 2. So once you move into your new industry at your current company, develop a track record of success in it, and more importantly, confirm you really like it. And, and then you change companies with your new function and you apply to new industries. Again, this is less risky for the hiring company as well as less risky for you. So here's an example. If you're currently in, say, product development at in financial services, and you want to move to marketing at a tech company, that means changing functions and industry. First, stay at your current company, move to marketing, develop a track record of success in marketing, and then target marketing roles at tech companies. Another strategy is networking with your former managers or former senior executives of your companies who've left and moved to other companies. They know the quality of your work. They can vouch for your ability to learn quickly, and as well as your flexibility for a new function in industry. And working with people you know reduces your risk too. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to have a position that's exactly right for you, but they can certainly refer you to their organizations and vouch and speak very highly of you. And this strategy may actually shorten the length of your making a career change and a functional change at the same time. But let me add one more thing. Take advantage of the fact that they know you well. Please pay attention if these former managers seem less supportive of your career change. Probe deeply about why. Knowing you, do they think you may not be a good fit? Do they think you're likely to succeed? I suggest you give them a lot of space so that they can provide candid feedback with you. It could be a learning experience and an eye-opener. Consider their advice seriously. So in summary, you can change both function and industry at the same time, but it will be harder and may take longer. Networking with people who know you well may shorten it. But it does happen all the time. People do change industries and they change functions. So don't be discouraged. You just need to think of the right strategies. But regardless of which function in industry, a successful career change is being very clear about your transferable skills for what you're targeting. Now, there are 4 major areas of transferable skills, and we'll talk about each of them individually. First one is functional skills, or it's industry skills, or it's experience with business models, or it's experience with this organizational changes. Let's talk about each one. The first one is functional skills. How do you position your experience to be relevant and transferable? For example, have you worked closely with the target function? Do you know what skills are needed to succeed in it? So think about, what are your current functional skills that will be valued in your target function, and be clear about what they are. I'll give you some examples. Is it that you have really good P&L management or budget management experience, which is really needed in your target function? Is it financial planning and forecasting? Is it high quality execution? Is it complex problem solving? Is it functional leadership? Is it that you're very metrics driven? Is it you're a fast paced decision maker? Is it that you have a lot of experience managing highly complex and large projects? So I'll give you an example. I worked with a client named James. He had spent 15 years at a bank. He was not in investment banking. He was in FP&A, which is financial planning and analysis. He wanted to change industries to big tech, and he wanted to change functions from finance to running a business. He applied for business partnership roles at a big tech company. This business partnership position was involved, the role was identifying and evaluating potential joint ventures, strategic alliances, partnerships, and affiliations. Basically, the role was to help the business to generate revenue and grow the business. So in our interview prep together, I helped him, we worked together to position his transferable skills to the actual responsibilities of this business partnership role. For example, positioning his, being very clear about his financial skills. For example, I suggested that he be sensitive to the fact that a lot of the people he'd be interviewing with were not finance people. They were business leaders. So the first thing is making sure that they understand finance is not accounting, because accounting is a backward-looking function. His experience is strategic finance, forward-looking financial planning and forecasting. At the bank, he was also responsible at looking at potential businesses to acquire. So he had skills in financial modeling, forecasting of revenue and market share, identifying financial synergies. He did competitive analysis, which are some of the same skills used in the business partnership role. And he clearly articulated his transferable skills, even though he did not have any job that had a business partnership title. He got the business partnership role at this big tech company. It took him a year, okay? And he spent 18 months in the role, and he asked to be moved into product development. In big tech, product development function often manages a P&L. So in 18 months, he moved from finance at a big bank to running a P&L at a big tech firm. It really had to do with how he positioned his skills. So now let's talk about other similar experiences that you have that might be similar to what your target is doing. For example, have you solved similar business problems as your target? For example, innovation. Is it capital raising? Is it AI leverage? Is it increased competition? Is it geographic expansion? Is it new product development? Is it declining profit margin of their businesses and yours? Is it commoditized pricing? Is it supply chain problems? Again, we're talking about transferable skills, but this time it's solving similar business problems. So you want to talk about, I have solved similar business problems, even though I have not worked in your industry. So what about similar industry challenges? For example, have you had experience with the growth stages of the companies that you're targeting? In other words, do you have startup experience in looking at another startup? Or have you worked on high growth and expansion stages of companies? Or have you worked on mature businesses or turnarounds? Again, you can talk about, I worked at companies at similar growth stages facing some of the same challenges. What about similar business model experience? Have is your business model experience similar to your targets? Could it be you both have B2B experience or B2C experience? Or are they both subscription businesses? Are they both high ticket, low price businesses? What about the length of the customer relationships? What about high touch customer service? Let me give you an example. I worked with a client named Mary who had quite a long career in, I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. She had about 10 to 12 years in credit cards, in marketing. And she really wanted to get into the entertainment business. Again, still doing marketing, but in entertainment. She had interviewed with a bunch of entertainment companies before we started working together. And she kept getting the, no, we need someone with entertainment experience barrier. So, and she couldn't seem to get past that. So when we started working together, I I suggested to her that in the credit card business, the business model is about acquiring getting new card members, right? Which is acquisition. It's getting the card members to use the charge as much as possible on the credit card, which is usage. And it's retention, meaning please don't drop your card, Mr. and Miss Card Member. So it's really about acquisition, usage, and retention. And I said to her, there are some segments in the entertainment business that's based on subscription of services, such as Netflix or streaming services, where again, like for example, Netflix, their business model is acquiring new subscribers, getting them to rent movies as much as possible, and please don't drop the subscription. So therefore, I suggested that she target the segment of the entertainment industry that was focused on the same business model as what she had. So instead of going to those companies and saying and trying to get over the barrier of, oh, you don't have entertainment experience, just talk about, I've had experience with the same business model as you have. I just did it with cards, and you want to do it with subscribers, and I did it with card members. So again, think about your business model experience. What do you have that's relevant? Another area to think about is, have you worked in organizations that have had some of the same organizational changes as your targets? In other words, did they acquire new companies recently? Are they doing post-merger integration? Are they reorganizing? Are they centralizing functions? Are they starting new businesses? So, what experience do you have that's similar? And that's what you should be focusing on as you think about how to make your career change. In the beginning, we had talked about, in the beginning of our discussion today, we had talked about hiring companies and what their concerns might be. Another area they think about is, what is your ability to transition to this new industry and function? For example, what is your learning agility? So it's important to demonstrate your success learning new things quickly. For example, you could talk about when you were promoted or given new responsibilities. How did you learn? How did you learn it? How did you get up to speed? How did you become effective? Did you spend a lot of time with your predecessors? Did you conduct your own research? Did you meet with subject matter experts? Talk about your track record of success, demonstrating your ability to learn new things and get up to speed quickly. The other areas, what's your flexibility and adaptability? Do you have can you talk about examples of starting things from scratch, developing things without much history or direction, creating organization out of chaos, showing that you can adapt to whatever is sort of thrown your way. And having that track record is important to allay their concerns. So again, when changing careers, it's important to demonstrate your track record of getting quickly up to speed in being agile and flexible. And then finally, what about addressing experience gaps? They're going to, by definition, if you're making a career change, there are things that are not in your experience, that will not be in your experience on your resume. How can you demonstrate your knowledge of the issues in that experience gap? How do you do this proactively before they ask you? I work with a client named Tina. She was director at a financial advisory firm working with corporate clients. But most of her corporate clients were big companies. She had a small percentage of small businesses, but most of her clients were big companies. And she helped her clients with their capital needs by helping them get access to funds, often through bank loans. She decided she wanted to leave her firm and she applied for a similar role at another financial advisory firm. But the role at this firm was working with clients who were small businesses, which was not where she spent the bulk of her time at her current firm. So I suggested that she demonstrate clearly her knowledge about the differences between working with big clients, big companies versus working with small businesses. So, and I recommended that she, instead of waiting for the company to ask her if she has small client company experience, she should proactively talk about her experience. So she and I worked on her positioning together. And it came out something like this. She said, my client companies have a wide range of characteristics. For large companies, my contact is usually the CFO and their organization. So they only wear financial hats. So they are experienced financially. For my small business clients, I work with owners or management of the businesses, and they tend to wear multiple hats. These owners tend to be less experienced financially. So I have to educate them more about financing, which requires me to do more handholding and go through the process with them step by step. Also, for my large clients, they tend to choose their lenders based on price or the terms of the loan. My, my small business clients choose a lender based on their personal relationships, either with the bank that they've done business with a long time, or it's the individual banker who they trust. So her positioning demonstrated her knowledge with a lot of the same issues, even though she did not have a lot of experience with small businesses. So they never asked her if she had experience working with small businesses. And frankly, if they had asked her, she would have to say, not a large number, which probably could have been a barrier right there. So it's important to get ahead of them asking about your experience gaps. Be proactive. So in summary, yes, you can change your career successfully, but it's very important to be strategic, positioning your transferable skills and relevant experience, and your learning agility and flexibility. Proactively show knowledge about your experience gaps. So now, this wraps up the formal presentation of our discussion today. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. But as we promised, we want to leave a lot of time for Q&A. So now let's move to Q&A. I know some of you submitted questions throughout the presentation. And before we start in Q&A, I want to reiterate Kashima's request at the beginning of the event. She will be selecting questions from the Q&A box. If you're still submitting questions, be sure to submit to the Q&A box. Please do not submit to the chat box. Also, Kashima has been watching the Q&A box, And she has identified some themes that represent interest among more than a few people, more than a few alumni. So we will be talking about topics that seem to where people have expressed interest. So, Kashima?
Thank you so much. So it seems like the first question, this person asked, how do you distinguish between being in the wrong career versus just being in the wrong organization?
That's a good question. Um, Usually people don't just, usually people, well, first of all, if you really, really don't like what you're actually doing, meaning the job content, it's probably the job. Um, if it's related to your relationship with your manager, dysfunction of the organization, those hopefully you could separate. But honestly, a lot of people who think it's the organization, and I'm not sure, I may like this function or my role, but I just don't like this organization. Often they switch to another organization doing a similar job, and then they realize, you know what, it's not the organization, it's all. And that's exactly what I did. In marketing, 6 years, I had 3 jobs because I kept thinking it was the organization or the industry, meaning switching. I switched from General Foods to Citibank, meaning thinking that um, financial service would be more fast moving, which it was. And I made two changes and realized, you know what? It's not the industry, it's not the company, it's the function. But I hope you don't have to make 2 changes before you realize that.
Thank you, Margaret. So the next question is from Rich Cruz. It's a bit of a long question, so I'm going to try to summarize it as much as I can. So Rich is a graduate from the Department of Visual Arts. This person has struggled with finding work after turning 40. He's 49 and has been out of work since March. Feedback seems to be that they are afraid that they can't afford him. And I'm afraid that they're not doing things. Sorry, after more than 1,000 applications and about 25 interviews, I'm still out of work and running out of unemployment. Any advice for a late career person like me?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you're going through this. It must feel very discouraging. Um, I would make a couple of recommendations. Um, One is if you're submitting applications, meaning your resume and your um, without tailoring each resume, meaning you're just submitting it. If you're not tailoring it to each job, it's really not effective at all to send. So sending 1,000 applications without tailoring your resume for the role is really not effective. So what I suggest first is if you're going to continue to apply more, um, tailor the resume and also try to network and try to find someone in those organizations you're applying to so that you could get someone to support your application and pull it out of that big pile. Um, Third of all, is that in terms of um, um, compensation and you're worried that they think you're too expensive. I mean, I think one thing you might suggest doing is asking for consulting work so that they can see the quality of your work, a project or a contract role, um, so they can see the quality of your work. And then that way they may be more convinced that your compensation should be higher. But also, doing contract work on a temporary basis while you're job hunting will, one, give you some income, and two, gives you a chance to get your foot into the door of many companies.
Hope that was helpful, Rich. We have a next question from Alec. If transitioning to a different if transitioning to a different industry but maintaining the same role, And if I'm offered the role, but the salary isn't quite what I'm expecting, would it be unreasonable to negotiate? And how hard should I try to convince the new company to increase the salary?
Um, I think it's always a little harder because you're competing with candidates who do have that same industry experience, right? Um, so you can try, but I'm not sure how effective it'll be. And also, it's usually very hard to negotiate after you've already gotten an offer. In other words, you almost have to prep them of what your expectations might be. And second of all, is that if you really cannot get them to budge, you could always ask for a 6-month salary review. I hope that's helpful.
We have a question from an anonymous person. These are fantastic strategies to position related experience. Can you share how these candidates were successful at securing their initial interviews, particularly in the light of automated resume screening?
First of all, the resume has to be tailored to key terms that are required. For example, when you're applying, there's a job description, right, that you're looking at. Usually in the responsibilities as well as in qualifications, it shows some key terms. In other words, you have to have this experience with X, Y, and Z. You have to have FP&A experience. You have to have distribution channel experience. So you have to make sure your resume has those words, even to get a chance of getting an interview. I'm not saying that if you tailor your resume, you'll definitely get an interview. What I'm saying is if you don't tailor your resume, it is impossible to match the algorithm. So that's why each online application has to be tailored specifically to that role, the responsibilities of the position, and the qualifications. Um, that's one thing. Second of all, is that um, always try to network into the company. There are a lot of Chicago alumni. I'm sure you could find them who work at some of the companies that you're targeting and ask for their support. That way, if they forward you will apply, you have to apply online, but maybe you could send them your resume and they could forward it to the hiring manager or the recruiter who's internal recruiter who's handling the assignment. In other words, just applying without tailoring your resume and without getting support, it is very hard to get your resume to be pulled out of that pile. Okay.
The next question, we have a good question from Catherine. She says, I appreciate that you have focused on highlighting skill for a job you want. Can you speak to identifying a position that would fit your skills if you want to do something different, but don't know what?
That's a good question. If you don't know what you want to do, um, think about what skills you want to use. Because in my experience, usually there's a correlation between what one is good at and what one likes to do. So, for example, um, if you like managing projects, and you're usually good at it. And if you're good at managing projects, usually you like it. So maybe you don't know what the role is, but you like the complexity of managing large projects. You like um, leading cross-functional teams to complete the project. You like the metrics orientation of the project. Those are the kinds of things you want to be clear about. Identifying what your own strengths are, and then finding a career that would match it. It's similar to what I did when I was changing careers. I just gave the career coach one criteria. Please help me identify a career where I can see the fruits of my labor faster, Well, when I start the project, whatever it is that I'm working on, I would like to have a rough idea of how long it'll take for me to finish it. And in executive search, it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. It's not multiple years. So for me, giving her that one criteria and having her identify consulting as a good option for me turned out to be exactly on target. Thank you.
We do have a few questions about experience gaps. So Kim asked, how do you address gaps and demonstrate knowledge in order to get to the interview stage?
When you say experience gaps, first of all, it depends how long the experience gaps were. And and um, obviously the longer the gaps, the harder it is. Okay. And second of all, is that networking is going to be your friend, okay, as opposed to applying to jobs online. Um, so you what you want to do is network among people who used to work with, who frankly they'll remember you frozen in time. They'll remember you from you when you started your gap. And they'll remember that you were a really good worker, that you were a high performer, and you had strong skills. And they're the ones who are going to be able to provide you with recommendations and speak highly of you to other organizations. So that's what I usually recommend for people who have experience gaps. Now, there are lots of reasons for experience gaps. It could be, um, and I'm referring to, say, um, people take family leave or take care of elderly parents, those kinds of things. Um, Now, if it's periods of unemployment um, and they're lengthy, then you really have to think about how to position that.
You. Um, G asks, I'm a government employee on administrative leave with 25 years outside the government before entering it. What are companies most concerned about when hiring someone like me?
Well, it depends how long you've been in government. If it's only been a few years and you said 25 years before, I'm assuming you work for, for-profit organizations. Um, then if it's a short stint in government, I don't think that should be a problem. Um, but it's important to explain why you went into government and why and why you're not staying in it now. So that's actually more important. So you want to explain and you want to say it in a positive way. In other words, you left corporate life, but instead of talking about leaving 25 years of corporate life, you want to say why you chose to get into government at that time and why you don't want to stay in it now. Now, you said you're on administrative leave, and I know that a lot of um, with the current um, changes going on in administration, um, there are a lot of people who've been put on leave. So that's easy to explain why you would be leaving or you're not formally working there now. So the question is their question would probably be, oh, okay, I understand you're administrative leave now, but did you want to move into another part of part of government? Or do you feel, you know what, this is not a good time for me being government. I really want to go back to corporate life. And you have to express a positive reason why. Is it you like the fact that for-profit organizations are driven around their business model is around making money? And how is it a faster pace that you like? So it has to be positive reasons why you're going back to corporate life. In other
Thank you,
words,
Mark.
you don't want to sound like you're running away from something, but rather you're proactively running just towards something. Sorry. Sorry, Kashima.
Okay, so Kim, similar to my previous question. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna go to the next person, Kim. I'll circle back with you. How do you navigate a few years, 3+ at an organization without a title promotion? I was told to wait until a new boss was hired to make the decision, and 7 months later, they just made that hire. I'm actively job searching, but I'm unsure how long that will take.
Okay. Um, so I guess is is your question, I'm not sure if your question is, should I stay and wait for the promotion, or how do I position myself when I'm interviewing? Why I didn't get a promotion in 3.5 years? I'm assuming you're referring to the latter. Okay, so I'm assuming you're saying, okay, as I am interviewing now, how do how do I explain when asked how come I haven't been promoted in 3 years? I think you could talk about that's part of the reason why you're leaving. So instead of waiting for them to ask you that question and put you in a defense position, proactively say the reason why I'm seeking a new opportunity is because um, I had been promised a promotion based upon my performance in X year. And since then, I've had change of management multiple times. So every time I have a new manager, I have to reprove myself, and they forget the promises made by the previous manager. So I feel I want more recognition of my increased responsibilities. So therefore, you're changing the conversation of why you're looking, and also the fact that you're not promoted wasn't due to your performance. You were obviously promised it. It's just you have different people promising and different people actually doing it, actually promoting you.
Thank you, Margaret. So we have a question from Michael Anderson. He says, I'm switching industries and will not be utilizing some specialized skills at the new industry, which is government regulation. While I would love a similar salary, I am not expecting it given the change. How can I address this when discussing salary?
Well, first of all, depending upon your state, um, some states don't allow you to allow organizations to ask you what your current salary is. Um, so that's one thing. And you have to check your state. Um, and then and then but whether they're allowed to ask you or not, each state can ask you what is your compensation expectation. Okay. The other thing is, in certain states, when they post a job, they're required to post a range of compensation for the role, but not all states have that. Okay. And to be honest, sometimes the ranges are so wide that it means nothing. Like they may say it's between 90 and 150, which really means nothing. That's really not helpful. Um, okay, so first you check all those three areas first, okay? And let's say you're in a state where then they're not allowed to ask, or they're allowed to ask your current compensation, in which case you do have to share it. But I always say, whether it's they're asking for your current comp, or they're asking your compensation expectations, always push back. For example, the, the first interview, the internal recruiter may ask you that question. You would say, first of all, you'd say, is there a compensation range for this position? Okay. Hopefully she'll give it to you. Okay. They'll give it to you. Maybe not. But let's say they don't. Then you would say, you know what? You and I are having an initial discussion right now, and I appreciate you sharing um, a description of the role with me. At this point, I feel it's really too early for me to assess, because my compensation expectations will be based the level of responsibilities in the role. It'd also be based on my fit with the manager, as well as um, other factors. So I feel I don't know enough yet about the role to share with you what my expectations are. Okay. Now, I'm sure they'll say, well, we want to make sure we're in the right range. Otherwise, I don't want to waste the hiring manager's time. And you would just ask again, so what is the range? So you always push back as much as you can without sharing the information, because you really want to say, my compensation expectations are based on multiple factors. One of them is a level of responsibility, how much travel will be involved, um, what would what is growth potential, um, career mobility. Right now, I don't know any of those. I don't know enough about any of those factors. So I would appreciate discussing this at a later point, when after I've gathered more information.
Thank you, Margaret. I hope that was helpful. We have another question from Rob. I worked as a set designer and art director in film TV production, but the industry in my locale has collapsed, and the work I did for 12 years was predominantly freelance. In my search for a full position in another industry, I found film, TV, and freelance experience to be problematic. My last full-time position was in 2013. Is there a way to reposition myself?
Um, you may have already done this, but I would, with all your freelance work over 12 past 12 years, um, have you, I hope you've been networking with all those former clients, either asking for more work or telling them you want a full-time job. And if they say, no, 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 we're not hiring, this is not a role that we would hire full-time, we're always going to use freelancers. Ask them to introduce you to their peers outside the organization, because they know the quality of your work. So therefore, if they know the quality of your work and they know you've done a good job for them, ask them for referrals. And don't expect that people will volunteer that unless you ask, because they may think, oh, he doesn't need help, he's doing his search on his own. In other words, people don't know how to help you if you don't ask them. In my experience working with clients, um, people genuinely want to help. It's just that they don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about how to help you. So you have to make it really easy for them. So instead of saying, oh, who could I talk to? Who can you refer me to talk to about potential full-time roles? You go on you go on your former client's LinkedIn and look up all the people he or she is connected to. And you could say, hey, I see you connected to Mary over at XYZ. I'm looking for full-time work. Do you mind making a connection on LinkedIn with her, or making an intro to her? That's like he would be able to do that in 3 seconds. He could do that. So the more specific you ask of a contact, the more likely they'll be able to do it, because they don't have to think about how to help you. Okay.
And I've been with a nonprofit organization for 10 years. It is the norm to have a 20 plus year tenure in the org. I've had multiple promotions my first 5 years, but I've had the same title for the past 5 years, and I can no longer move any higher as my boss reports to C-suite, and she will not be leaving in the next 5 years. While I love my work, I'm afraid other changes will result in an end to my job. How will other for-profit and nonprofit organizations see my long tenure?
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning. Has this person been at an organization for 20 years? Is that what you said?
Um, this person says 10 years, and it is a norm to have a 20 plus year long tenure in the org.
So I'm not sure I understand the question. Are they saying, I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I've been with the organization, the nonprofit organization, for 10 years. I've had multiple promotions my first 5 years, but I've had the same title for the last 5 years, and I can't move any higher. Um, while I love my work, I'm afraid other changes will result in an end to my job. How will other for-profit and nonprofit organizations see my long tenure? I'm assuming
Um,
it's in 10 years.
I mean, okay. Well, you said that in your industry, most people are at companies 20 years and you've been there 10. So I don't think they would view that negatively if that's what your concern is. Um, and and even 10 years is and 10 years is not, it's a good number for having been there a long time, but not too long. So I'm not sure what your concern is. I'm not sure I understand. I think you should, but since you said you're unlikely to be promoted, given in your organization because you report to someone in the C-suite, um, then it is time to look for another opportunity. And with a 10-year track record at a company, you've proven that um, you're not a job hopper and you can make a commitment to an organization and you were promoted, so you were recognized for your achievements. So I would encourage you to look outside. I think that's the right thing to do, especially if you're worried that your role could be affected. It's always better to find a job with a job.
Thank you, Margaret. We have about 4 minutes left, so I'll answer two more questions. Um, we have a question from Anthony. Hello, do you have any advice for someone who has worked in academic research? He's a research data analyst who would like to pivot to similar roles industry. How can I leverage my experience in nonprofit to a for-profit organization?
Okay. So you've been in academic research. That I'm assuming that means you've been working at a university um, in data analytics. First of all, data analytics, there is a high demand for people with data analytics experience. First of all. Second of all, is that um, again, let's go back to what I talked about. Okay. So now you have a functional experience being a data entry, but you want to go from academia to for profit. Okay. So what problems did you solve with your data analytics that'd be relevant to a for profit organization? That's how you could make the transition. So think about what were the what were the problems you were solving with your data analytics? What were the topics you worked on? Okay.
Okay, and so we'll take our last question from Kim. There seems to be very high barrier moving from academic fields to industry. She says she has 25 years of experience in higher education. Do you have any specific suggestions for overcoming these barriers? I had no success on and off over the last 10 years trying to transition from research positions to an industry, even when translating skills.
It is hard from academia, and I can say this because my husband's an academic too, in academic research. Especially after you've been doing it for so long. I have worked with clients who've been young academics who switched to business. But and maybe I'll just give you an example. This might not be exactly on target because you have 25 years experience, this person was much younger. She was in a PhD program in psychology and decided that she did not want to pursue an academic career. And so she finished her academic work with a master's. And so she wanted to get into business. And we talked about, I asked her what she did in research in psychology. She said, well, you know, I do a lot of surveys. I do a lot of, I have a lot of theses that I'm trying to prove with my research. And I analyze a lot of data. I draw a lot of conclusions. I said, okay. I said, okay, so you like to analyze a lot of data and draw conclusions? I said, well, and I said, it sounds like you really like metrics. You like being metrics driven. And she said, yes, I really love that. And I said, okay, well, one function that's extremely metrics driven is the operations function in a company. It's about improving efficiency. It's about process improvement. And we worked together. And she applied for role in operations for a jewelry company. And she got the role and was promoted a few times and became head of operations for this company. So you have to think about the research that you do. What are the skills you are using? And what other careers would use those same skills? But I know it's hard when you've been doing it for 25 years. Maybe an interim would be think about like think tanks. That's not for profit, of course, but they're a bit of a segue. But obviously, they do a lot of research and might value your skills.
So that
That's it.
concludes our last question. Huge thank you to Margaret. I hope everyone found this very helpful and insightful. As a reminder, please complete a short survey. This feedback will help us shape future events. So please take a moment to complete it if you can. And thank you all for spending your afternoon with us, even if it is 1 a.m. where you are. And we hope that you will come back very soon and have a great afternoon. Great day. Thank you so much to Margaret.
Thank you all very much for joining us. Enjoy your day.